Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some questions to ask about Julian Assange and his extradition trial in the UK. I might start by asking the Minister, but if she feels that it should go to other representatives, I'm happy. I understand the government's position is Australia can't intervene in a court proceeding of another state, but Australia can advocate for due legal process. Just quickly, are Australian representatives monitoring Julian Assange's trial in the UK?
Most definitely, Senator.
Thank you. And how are you doing that, Minister?
Senator, through the High Commission in London, officers from the High Commission are, sorry, I'm not sure that's in the right spot. Officers from the High Commission are providing advice, summaries, I would say, of proceedings through the normal channels, both to me and to senior officials in the department. But I might ask either Mr Todd or Mr Larson to add to that.
And could you also just answer whether we have people in the courtroom during watching proceedings?
Senator Andrew Todd, First Assistant Secretary, Consular and Crisis Management Division. Yes, we have consular and High Commission officials in the court throughout each hearing. Yep.
Okay. And so I did have anything to add about the observations?
That they're providing us very
Are they
detailed,
providing reports back to you, for example? Like,
they're
what's
providing
the process?
factual reports back to the department and the Minister on what the proceedings have transpired and what the arguments were raised. It's a very factual summary that we get pretty close to the end of the court hearing ending.
Thank you, Mr Todd. And you'd be aware that of reports that Julian is not confident he can speak to or instruct his lawyers in private from the glass-fronted dock where he's been placed in a glass room while the hearing is in progress. And he's also complained about noise outside, that he can't hear proceedings. Have you confirmed that this is the case, or have your consular officials confirmed this is the case?
Senator, we're aware of those issues being raised, and we're also aware that the court has reached a decision on those matters and agreed that the provisions in that court are standard procedures, and the magistrate hearing the case has decided to have those provisions remain in place.
That may well be the magistrate's view, Mr Todd. Have you formed any other view as to whether he is able to instruct his lawyers in confidence when the trial is progress? What is your feedback on that?
We're not in a position to comment on that, Senator. We're observing the court. We have limited access and availability to report on Mr Assange because of the decision that was taken by him to withdraw consent for information to be provided about his circumstances in the prison to us last year. We have written to him.
I'm aware of that. We've discussed this in private to Mr Todd. That's not what I'm focused on.
We are attempting to provide consular services to him. We are attempting to visit with him. We have offered our assistance, and we have.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you short there, Mr Todd, because I know Senator Abetz is going to be monitoring with precision my timing. I'm more interested in whether you're observing whether a fair trial is being held, and I do believe that is a role that Australia can advocate for in terms of due legal process, and you can raise those concerns with your UK counterparts if you believe that is the case.
I think.
Are you saying you don't believe that is the case?
At this stage, we have not received any information to suggest that anything other than due process is being followed in the United Kingdom.
Right. Okay. Could I? You may have also seen reports that Julian was handcuffed 11 times, stripped naked twice, and had his case files confiscated after the first day of his extradition hearing. Have you confirmed that is the case?
We sought advice from the prison in relation to those reports, and we were advised that other than the issue with legal documents, they were standard prison to court and court to prison procedures.
Minister, do you believe that's fair treatment of an Australian citizen?
Senator, I understand, and to take from what Mr Todd has said in relation to how prisoners going to court are dealt with in the United Kingdom system, that there are a range of procedures which the equivalent of the corrective services agencies, I presume would be the title, the corrective services undertake. It doesn't matter who the person in question is, who is appearing before the court as the defendant. So the approach taken in relation to Mr Assange is no different than the approach taken to others. That is a matter for the United Kingdom system. In relation to the matter of legal documents, Mr Todd may have more to add on this, but I understand that there has been an acknowledgement that an error was made in that matter, and the documents accordingly returned, and I trust we have determined that that won't occur again.
Okay, and that was because of the intervention of DFAT officials, or was it
through the High Commission? I
Through
believe
the
so.
High
I believe so,
Commission. Okay,
Senator,
thank
but I won't take credit for that if it was not, but I believe
All right.
that to be the case.
Okay. Could I ask, in relation to
That's correct.
extraordinary matters, it was revealed last week in court that meetings between Julian and his lawyers inside the Ecuadorian embassy had been secretly filmed. Have you confirmed that that is the case, Minister?
Senator, that is not a matter which goes to our ability to confirm or otherwise, would be my understanding, but if Mr Todd has any more to add in relation to what the High Commission has sought information on in Britain, I will ask him to do so.
Those allegations are subject to separate court proceedings in Spain, as I understand it.
And there is also that point.
We are aware of those hearings and will monitor as best we can what those hearings reveal.
Have you raised concerns that it would be a breach of due legal process, an extraordinary breach of due legal process if that occurred? Have you at least raised those concerns with the UK and the US?
At this stage we haven't. We're awaiting the conclusion of legal processes to determine the validity or otherwise of the allegations.
Leaving it to a foreign court is one thing. Do you not have a view as from your own expertise and your own observations as to the treatment of an Australian citizen in this regard? I wouldn't leave it to a foreign court, to be honest. Why are you?
I don't think it's appropriate that my personal views are expressed here. I'm representing the
Sorry, I meant
Department of
you in
Foreign Affairs and
pejorative
Trade.
in the sense of DFAT and the
What
government.
we seek to assure is that due legal process and the standards and conditions that apply to citizens in any country apply to Australian citizens undergoing legal process in that country.
Can I ask Mr Larson to add that, please, Senator?
Yes, thank you, Minister. James Larson, Chief Legal Officer, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Senator, obviously, in circumstances where you have contested legal proceedings in a variety of different jurisdictions, as you'll know, as your comments at the outset underscored, ultimately those legal proceedings have to take their course. You have a variety of contested facts in issue. Ultimately, the question of whether or not this alleged activity impacted on the rights of Mr Assange, that may well be something which will be relevant to the United Kingdom court proceedings. It would have to be fully tested in those proceedings.
Okay, so I mean, yes. So what you're saying is it potentially jeopardises the chance of Julian receiving a fair trial.
Senator, I didn't say that.
No, I'm just saying in terms of your comment about how it may affect the proceedings.
Yes.
And so let me say it. It could potentially jeopardise the chance of him receiving a fair trial, and it is if it's true, it's a considerable breach of legal professional privilege. Can you at least advocate your concerns over these allegations?
I think, Senator, my observation on this is that the Australian government has a very high level of confidence in the British criminal legal process. We have no evidence to suggest that he is receiving treatment that is different from any other person in his circumstances. The long-standing Australian position in relation to representations concerning legal proceedings is in circumstances where an Australian is prejudiced as a consequence of being an Australian national in those court proceedings, or there is some other gross violation of rights. That is a matter which the Australian government would seek to intervene in. But there is simply no evidence, I think, in relation to the United Kingdom court proceedings at the present time, which would found an Australian concern.
Could I ask you, Mr Larson, in relation to the Spanish court proceedings, have you at least asked the UK to delay or express any concerns around the continued trial of Julian Assange, that UK trial doesn't continue until the Spanish court has made a deliberation in this regard?
Senator, as you'd appreciate, it's not the practice of the Australian government to interfere in...
I'm not asking you to interfere, I'm asking you to advocate
frankly,
around due process.
We are not a party to the legal proceedings in the United Kingdom, Senator, so no, we haven't done so, and I wouldn't expect we will.
I'm not asking you to be very clear, as you highlighted in my preamble, I understand you can't intervene in court proceedings of another state, but you can advocate for due legal process and raise concerns with your counterparts. Will you ask them to delay the proceedings in the UK court until the Spanish court has deliberated on this matter? That's a fair and reasonable thing to ask on behalf of an Australian citizen.
That position will no doubt be taken into consideration in considering our next steps.
Okay. Could I ask the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, and I asked Minister in the Senate about this a few weeks ago, said the case of Julian Assange is a modern show trial featuring politically motivated prosecutors, denial of justice, manipulated evidence, biased judges, unlawful surveillance, denial of defence rights and abusive prison conditions. Does DFAT have any view on whether there's any truth in what the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations is saying?
Senator, I'll ask the officials to respond, but I will reiterate that I stand by the response I gave you in the Senate that day, and I'll also note for the record that to the best of my knowledge and advice, at no point in time has the Special Rapporteur been in any contact with the Australian government to raise these concerns directly, but I will ask officials to comment
Well, that
further.
would be a worry, wouldn't it, Minister? Yeah. That would be concerning that they haven't raised that with you.
So I can confirm what the Minister said, that the Special Rapporteur has not been in contact with the Australian Government to raise his current concerns or his previous suggestions that the Australian Government was complicit.
And do you know why that is the case, Mr Todd, why they haven't been in touch with you?
I cannot
How would we...
offer comment, I just don't know. But in terms of due process, I think the Foreign Minister made it very clear on the 25th of February this year that Mr Assange is entitled to due process, and we expect the legal systems in both the US and the UK to deliver. And if there are legal issues, he has an expert legal team that has an ability to represent his concerns, his issues, in a judicial system that we have every confidence in. And we see that if these are genuine concerns held by Mr Assange and his legal team, he has adequate avenues to raise them. Is that the Court of Law in the UK?
Apologies for interrupting. It seems to be that there's a bit of an asymmetry here. Nils Melzer hasn't reached out and contacted you. Given the extraordinary nature of his very public claims, because this is a global issue, not just an issue for an Australian citizen, have you sought to have a meeting with him? And Minister, would you meet with him if I arranged it to discuss his concerns?
Senator, I would...
That was the last question.
I would expect those concerns to be raised appropriately, as matters are usually with us. They have not been so raised. I would assure you, as I also did in the chamber, that I did raise these matters, or a number of matters, concerning Mr Assange with the British Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, when he was here about 3 weeks ago now to indicate our expectations and our understanding of the due process that Mr Assange would receive in the UK system. I've also raised matters which have been brought to our attention in relation to conditions in claimed conditions in Belmarsh Prison and ensured that the High Commission has taken those up appropriately with authorities in the UK. I'm actively seized of those issues as they are brought to my attention, and we do address them. What the Special Rapporteur does or does not do is a matter for him, but I do think it is important, given what he has had to say, to note for the record that he has not been in contact with the government.
Have you been in contact with him, Minister?
Senator, I am not the person who is raising those issues. The UN Special Rapporteur is
You must be
raising those
concerned
issues.
about those concerns that he has raised.
Senator, I've made clear that I
Just a
have
follow-up,
addressed
Senator
any
Abetz.
concerns I have through the appropriate channels with UK authorities via the High Commission and via officials.
So picking up the phone's not an appropriate
No, that was your
appropriate
last
thing
question.
to do.
Sorry, Senator Whish-Wilson. We now move to